And we're back to talking about Obojima. I got to sit down with Jeremiah Crofton for one 30-minute interview and 1 hour-long interview discussing the video I made titled The Problem with Obojima. And I finally gotten my thoughts together, so let's talk about it. But first, introductions. My name is VJ Harris. My pronouns are he, him, they, them, and something funny. I am a full-time tabletop role-playing designer and professional PM. You might recognize my name from things such as MCDM Productions, Arcadia Magazines, Flea Mortals. This epic 5e monster book contains 339 stat blocks plus new rules for action-oriented creatures, minions, companions, retainers, encounter building, and more. An Elf and an Orc Cat Little Baby Volumes 1 through 4, An Elf and an Orc Cat Little Baby D&D is a rule supplement that entirely replaces Chapter 2 of the Player's Handbook. Instead of D&D's bioessentialist approach, this title separates biological traits and cultural traits into two categories, parentage and upbringing. To create a new player character using this supplement, players choose 2 birth parents and an upbringing. Then they go on to choose a background and class as normal. Players can feel free to create any combination to create a unique and vibrant character. I am also the creator of On Call, the werewolf dispatching game where you can't shift during the full moon because you have to be on call in case anything goes wrong with your fellow werewolves. If you like dispatch, this is the game for you. I've made a bunch of other stuff too, which you can check out. The link to everything in the description below. Back to the video. I want to put a disclaimer up right now. Through the course of this video, I will be sharing segments of the interview for all of you to see. The order I'll show them is in a different order than the interview happened because I didn't know I'd only have 30 minutes for the first one, so I prioritized specific questions and didn't do follow-ups until the second interview. But to make sure you know I'm being honest, I've posted 2 additional videos, both linked below, and you can find them in the Obojima playlist. They both show the interview in the order I did the questions. The first one is the cleaned up version. Over the course of listening to the videos, I realized how much I say like and and. So if you see some weird skips, it's because I cleaned it up, but that was only for me. I didn't cut out anything with Jeremiah. The second one is the raw version. Listen at your own peril. Also, I cropped my face out. As I was watching and editing, I hated every second of seeing my face, so I just made Jeremiah the focus. Also, at any point where you hear a sort of mechanical voice speaking, that was created using Microsoft Edge's text-to-speech function. No AI was used in the making of this video. Also, I want to apologize to Ari Levitch. Somehow I chopped up his name and was calling him Levi or Levy instead of Ari in some instances. I don't know how I did that. But now, on to the meat of things. So, I made this video saying that Obojima was bad, and it wasn't from the standpoint of mechanics because I hadn't checked those out yet at the time. I'm currently making my way through the book and will share my thoughts chapter by chapter. It was because of the cultural appropriation and potential Orientalism surrounding the project. This video that I did was also posted on my TikTok, and I got this comment. Hey VJ, this was a very well made video. I can tell you've put a lot of time and effort into this, and I appreciate you putting energy into educating people on these important topics. This is a TikTok comment, so I can't respond to everything from your video. What I would love to say is that we as a team have put a lot of effort into ensuring Obojima is an art piece for everyone to enjoy, one that takes inspiration from the bodies of work we love, like Studio Ghibli and Legend of Zelda, and creates something new that is a respectful homage to those inspirations, rather than being harmful. To do this, we've worked with a talented cultural consultant and creative to help shape Obojima into what it is. There's of course a lot of nuance to that statement and a lot of things not said, but I want to be clear that the effort and due diligence were put in. If you're ever interested, I would be happy to chat with you sometime to talk through our process and also learn from any concerns you might have. So when I got this comment, I wasn't sure if I was going to do the interview. As I stated in the original video I did, despite not being Asian in general or Japanese specifically, I was talking about this because a friend of mine, Kai K, had been talking about it, and he shouldn't have to shoulder the burden of this conversation alone as somebody who's Japanese and affected by it. I felt weird because at that point, to my knowledge, they hadn't reached out to Kai, and that was confirmed when I checked in with her about if it was okay for me to take this interview. Now, I brought up this issue with Jeremiah. Let's take a look at his response. So why have this interview with me? Before I said yes to the comment, I reached out to my buddy Kai, who, like I mentioned in the video of why I was talking about this, because I felt a little bit uncomfortable because as far as I could tell, Kai has been talking about this. Kai made a whole website to talk about this and like give people resources and stuff, but Kai was not given the opportunity to interview you guys. And from what like they have said when they have like tried to get answers or reached out, they were kind of like might have been given like the runaround and not actually given any like concrete answers or like actually been reached out to. And as a Black person who actually isn't affected by this particular part of the cultural appropriation conversation, I'm just kind of over here like, why are you talking to me and not like say Kai instead?
Yeah, I mean, the short of it is in the moment. So yeah, Kai reached out in the moment. We didn't really. Yeah, in the moment we didn't really have. We kind of were resting on the fact that the statements we have made are all we've been public about the things that we're doing and the effort that we're putting into it, and we didn't have a lot more to say in regards to what we're doing. Like yeah, we didn't have a lot to say in the moment, and now as you know as it's kind of like we can see that there's like a growing concern online, we felt it was time to maybe step up and say like, hey, we have put effort, we've tried to be honest and open about it and try to start the conversation with people, because I don't think sitting and not saying, I don't think just sitting and letting it pass over is the right thing to do. I think it's better to try to talk and communicate. Yeah, I would say that's probably that's the best way I could say it. Is like in the moment we felt like we had said everything publicly and tried to be open and honest, and we didn't know that there was much to add. But I think as time has gone on, it's clear that I think there's like a general feeling within the community of people that haven't consumed Obojima that we haven't put any effort in, or that, like you stated earlier, that the consultant is just there as like a checkbox for us to be like, oh yeah, we did the thing, and you don't need to, please don't talk to us or worry about it. And so we're realizing that a lot of people that are maybe frustrated aren't actually reading the media or aren't participating in the art, like aren't going through it. And so what I wanted to do is start reaching out to people. And you're not the only person who I've sent this to. There's other people that I've left comments inviting meetings with and things like that. You're just the first person who said yes.
Okay.
So but when the video comes up and people are concerning it, I also think your video is very well stated. And so I wanted to be like, oh yeah, would you like to commute? Like, let's talk. But I think what it comes down to is like a lot of people are frustrated, but I think now is time for me to be open and be like, well, like, if you haven't read it, let's talk through it, because I think there might be some misunderstanding. I think we have the best intentions. I think we've done we put a lot of effort and energy into this. And if you have read it, which is the thing that I really want, like if someone has read it and there are issues that they see, that's what I want to find those issues. I want them to be like, this is a problem. Like, we don't like this aspect. And this is something that we think is potentially damaging. And that's, if we can fix those things, that's the thing we want to do. But I don't see a lot of pointing towards these are problems that we read and it's an issue. It's in general like an assumption that everything we've done is with ill intent, and that like it's bad, and it's bad because I think it's bad, not because we've gone through and maybe read through it or talked to our consultant. Like you've done, you've reached out to our consultant, like you've put a lot of effort into it, I think. So I'm grateful of that. But yeah, as far as originally being reached out to, we've been reached out by a handful of people. At the time, we felt it was best just to rest on the things that we had stated, and those were the statements that we had made, and those statements are still true. Like, we are still putting effort. I can send it over to you, but we have a long big Kickstarter update when we initially announced that we were bringing Emma on, and like talked about all the efforts that we were putting into trying to make sure that this is a product for everyone. And that statement is true still then and still now, and that's kind of the statement that we, as people were reached out to, that's the statement we would bring them to. But that's in general. Now, as time has gone on, we're realizing that statement is not enough for a lot of people, and maybe I need to reach out and talk to them either one-on-one or do an interview or something. Like, I need to express, like, no, that we are putting effort into this, and this isn't something that...
Assuming they would... So you mentioned in a previous section of this, I think it's probably part one. It's definitely part one. That like you're reaching out to a bunch of different people when I asked like, hey, why did you have me do this and not Kai and whatnot? Do you have any plans, assuming like Kai's fine with doing it, to reach out and possibly like talk stuff like we've just done here or anything like that? Or if you have that answer right now, like
Yeah. So Kai actually just reached out on social media, and so I've not responded yet because I'm about to leave for Kentucky. But yeah, I think I'd be happy to talk with Kai, and chat about their thoughts and things, and just I'm always open. I'm always trying to be open to discussion, and at the time I felt like we've kind of stated everything we needed to, but clearly there's still discussion that need to be had. And I'm also, always happy to learn from specifics and things like that. So if there are aspects of the book, or I guess, parts of things that Kai feels are, upsetting or wrong, or, examples of Orientalism, that's the type of stuff that I'm definitely trying to take care of. So yeah, I'm always happy to talk to Kai, and already in the works of trying to arrange that.
So I don't particularly like that's why the conversation wasn't had. It feels kind of dismissive of the topic, like kind of a I said what I said, even if that wasn't meant to be adversarial or the intent of it, which I don't think it was. But I am glad for the honesty, right? And I'm happy to say that at the time of this recording, Jeremiah has reached out to Kai, and there were 2 conversations of which Kai described as very productive. While they didn't see eye to eye on everything, it was a good conversation. As part of doing background for this interview, I reached out to the cultural consultant that was used for Obojima. Emma is Japanese herself and has training in the field. I reached out to her prior to the interview to ask the following questions. At what point during the process of Obojima's creation were you brought in? Did you feel your feedback was welcomed and received and implemented properly? Did you or do you have any involvement with the podcast and its topics as far as cultural sensitivity goes? Is there anything you think I should know going into this interview? Here's her response. I started as the cultural consultant on the first book in June 2024, at which point it was a draft that only had a handful of sections that the team considered to be ready for release. From the very beginning, they were really receptive to feedback and eager to make changes, though there were some complications from the fact that certain elements had been established for a while, such as the name Obojima, and a few things had been developed with participation from Kickstarter supporters and the podcast audience. Otherwise, they were ready to scrap or rework anything that I flagged and have moved away from some earlier design practices entirely based on our interactions. I've experienced all kinds of pushback as a consultant on other projects, but I've yet to feel like this team is being stubborn or dismissive, especially if I note something is harmful. That said, I have not been involved with the podcast or the marketing. My work is very much behind the scenes of the game stuff. This is my preference, but also something that Jeremiah and the team have done to keep me from being a target in any way. They have caught a lot of criticism for stating Ghibli as an inspiration, but also had a pretty rancid response to announcing they had hired a cultural consultant. We talk fairly regularly, so I have shared my thoughts on removing references to Studio Ghibli in their promotional material, since I see it as unnecessary for explaining the setting, and like many, find these things exhausting. While I have little control over outreach matters, I have been given significant space within the future development of related products. After the first book was completed, I was added to the recurring writers' meetings to be there to guide creative direction and specific content development. They have been the first group to bring me in early and keep me around in this way, which has been interesting. Now, let's take a look at what Jeremiah had to say.
It's this weird space where it's like, immediately we knew, like, okay, we're stepping into spaces that we're not familiar with. We need someone to be a part of this to help guide us and make sure that we're taking the appropriate action. We're being sensitive of certain topics, and we're being informed of certain topics. But at the same time, I don't want to push our cultural consultant at the front line to be here's the token person for us to be look at this person. And also that's not necessarily her battle either, right? She's not signing up to be the voice and to answer comments and questions. That's why that's what I signed up for. So it is a weird balance of being we're trying to take the appropriate action, but I'm also not trying to be showboaty and be like, look at this person.
Yeah.
Aren't we awesome?
No,
You know?
I totally understand that. And okay, since we have limited time, I had a number of questions, but we're not getting through all of those in 30 minutes.
Okay.
All in all, in regards to bringing in a cultural consultant, they did exactly what they were supposed to do. They didn't just bring her in to say, hey, we did this. Stop talking about us this way. I commend them for that, given the fact the behavior I just mentioned is a pervasive issue in the space. It's something I've experienced before. Now, as you heard, Jeremiah brought up the rancid response to bringing in a cultural consultant. I asked more about that in the second interview. One of the things I really want to ask about here is because we've been talking about cultural appropriation and Orientalism and stuff from the side of this conversation where it's like, hey, these are the issues, we care about them, here's where we're seeing some problems here. However, on the other side of that, because as you know, I reached out to Emma, your cultural consultant, asked a couple of questions, and I was told that you guys got a pretty rancid response to bringing on a cultural consultant. And if you're okay with talking about it, could you say a little bit more on that? What are we calling rancid here? Was it from both sides of the aisle, like people on my side of things and people not on my side of things? Like what happened there exactly?
So yeah, like early on when we were building out the project, we were looking for Emma. We always knew we wanted to bring on someone like Emma to help us. And eventually we found her and it was awesome. And so we're like, okay, let's talk about it. Like, hey, this is something we're doing. This is like our official statement on like the effort that we're trying to put forth. And we did it to our Kickstarter community because that's where our audience was at the time. Like everyone was getting all of their information from us from Kickstarter. And it just got so toxic so quick. A lot of people were calling us woke and dumb and diluting the content and saying that all a cultural consultant was going to do was ruin a product and it was going to stop me from being creatively free and it was going to diminish everything I've ever done because we wanted to make something that we knew wasn't going to be harmful. And so we were trying to do that. And for some reason, it was like out of the woodwork, which was shocking because again, up until that point, our community was so kind and so generous, and they still are. And yeah, so we got this like huge outpouring of hate, and then of course with that came a bunch of people trying to like defend that position and being like, hey, it's totally the right thing. They shouldn't be, they're not, Emma's clearly talented and has all these skill sets and is the right person for the job. And so it just turned into this like very, it was very, I guess, as quickly as it could be, very culture war, very charged. And so in the time, we were trying to answer people, and then at a certain point we were like, okay, we're done with this. And so instead we took out the ban hammer and just started refunding people right and left. If you were going to be the statement we took was like, Emma is our team member, and if you were going to threaten and attack Emma, then you are not going to be a part of this Kickstarter. And everyone, like, the big chunk of them tried to apologize and asked to stay on. And at that point in time, it was like the deed was done. So it didn't matter. We just wiped through and started refunding and canceling and blocking and getting rid of everyone that was like, that was attacking Emma specifically. That was like the thing that we were doing. Like, if you're going to be like this, like, I can't necessarily stop all the people that enjoy Obojima from having my exact same opinion and beliefs in the world. But at the same time, you sure as heck aren't going to come in and be toxic and horrible to our team, and especially after us trying to make sure that we're making a product that is respectful. It just felt crazy. Maybe crazy is the wrong word, but it felt out of nowhere for sure.
Yeah.
And it did definitely was our first interaction with, this topic, specifically a cultural consultant. And of course it was definitely the opposite reaction, where people were upset that we would even need one. And yeah, it wasn't good. That part wasn't good. I was gonna say, eventually after the clearing, after the culling, and we removed a lot of those people, it became very, it became very relaxed again, and that was great. And for the most part, a vast majority of the people that supported the Kickstarter were very, very on board with bringing Emma on and making sure that the project was heading in that direction. So
when I asked Emma about it and like she mentioned it, I was like, I'm not surprised. There is a segment of the TTRPG community, and people argue if it's the majority, if it's the minority, whatever, that very much pushes back against anything that's like, hey, we're trying to be respectful of other people's cultures here, even in this regard. I will give you your flowers on actually defending Emma and getting rid of those people. That doesn't always happen with people who bring on cultural consultants. I think I'm pretty sure I said it in the blurb in the last one, but to say it again, sometimes cultural consultants, sensitivity readers, the whole 9 yards are just brought on as a checkbox rather than actually expertise being respected and actually implemented. So A+ on that actual regard. I'm happy to see that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I hope that it's the minority at this point of the community, but sometimes it feels like we slip into a position, like a point in the internet where it is the majority, and you're like, oh my goodness,
yeah,
what is going on right now?
One can definitely dream, and if it's not the majority, if it's not the minority, maybe one day in the near future, hopefully it will be the minority. As I said, I am not surprised that was the response. The vitriolic reaction to people even attempting to navigate other people's cultures and sometimes even their own with an iota of care is par for the course and a clear indication of how far this community needs to go for actual tangible change. And being unwilling to take money that has already been pledged to you due to someone's bigoted beliefs is something more people should do, in my opinion, and I commend them for that. Before making The Problem with Obojima, I had briefly discussed an issue I had with one of their podcast episodes that is no longer available for people to watch, titled Make Monsters Monstrous. There's actually two parts to this particular part of the conversation. The first being, why does it stop being fantasy? The second being, why did you delete the clip? The first thing is talking about the podcast episode you guys did, which was the clip of Keep Monsters Monstrous. And I do have a quick quote from it that I want to say, and then I want to ask you about like something specific around that. If you start getting into simulation, where what is the howler culture and what is the nature of intelligence and like do they have a soul, and like then you're going to it's like you're done playing fantasy and now you're into like, the moral nature of our world and existential stuff. And I guess my big question about that is, why is it no longer fantasy at that point for like a project that has in part been marketed as like inspired by Studio Ghibli? Studio Ghibli movies do have fantasy in them. They have the magic, the surreal, but it also has that kind of immersive reality, which has, real world elements that keep it grounded while still having the magical aspect.
100%. Yeah, so it's interesting, right? Like Obojima rests in this weird space where it's taking inspiration, it's taking inspiration from things like Studio Ghibli. Those are things that we really love, and there's a lot of aspects of Studio Ghibli that you might find in Obojima. In fact, at the beginning of our monsters section, like the creature section of our book, we talk about solving other ways and methods of solving conflict rather than combat. Outcomes that aren't all oriented around fighting and the danger and all of that, because we are building a campaign in D&D where that is kind of the through line for D&D, is this conflict heavy, combat oriented thing. And so a majority of Obojima is that it is the nuance of a character, this gray morality where sometimes you're in agreement with the villain, sometimes you're not. A lot of it takes from the inspiration that Studio Ghibli gave us in characters like like in Porco Rosso, where the American pilot is the villain. He's the villain that builds up, and you're kind of like, okay, this is the bad guy, until the very end, which you realize the morality of it. It's like, okay, but we're all against fascism. And so like that's a big aspect of Obojima all throughout. There's this duality of both being at conflict with the character, but also being but also having the opportunity to solve that conflict outside of that. Now, that said, what the Howlers specifically are meant to be in Obojima is to play on the opposite end of that. Because there's so much of the other aspect, we kind of see Obojima as a spectrum, a sliding scale, where you can tell stories like My Neighbor Totoro, but you can also tell stories like Princess Mononoke, or like The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. We wanted creatures like the Howler that kind of act as the bokoblin of our universe. And because D&D is so action oriented, we were trying to, specifically in the Howler and those things, we're trying to keep those disconnected from the other aspect, so you can have that play style without the morality of it. It's kind of like killing a robot. The robot is the robot, and you don't feel necessarily bad for it because it's a machine. And that's kind of some of the aspects that we're trying to focus on, is by keeping the morality and not developing the culture surrounding the Howlers and other creatures like the Howlers. We can kind of leave them in this category where you can have conflict. We're not even necessarily you should go and kill them, but we're saying you can have conflict and not necessarily feel bad about that conflict, versus all of the other creatures in Obojima tend to be focused on the other direction, where you should be trying to solve conflict through other means, and there is nuance to those characters. As far as the fantasy question, I think it's more about a statement of TTRPGs and role playing in general. People go to role playing often to escape, and so I guess our statement in general is we're trying to allow you to escape, and not necessarily with the Howlers specifically and Fishfolk, we're trying to let you escape and not necessarily think about the morality of the conflict with those characters and those types of characters. Not to say all of our characters are like that, because they're not. A majority of them aren't, but that's specifically what we're trying to say, is we're trying to allow you to build the fantasy of, like, I'm a heroic character and this is the conflict, and it's okay to have this conflict. That's what we wanted out of these creatures. Sorry if that was...
Okay, so here's the thing about this for me. This response explains to me why they chose to do that with the Howlers, which I already understood. I think the clip explains why they wanted to do it in that way. Now, there wasn't an expansion on other creatures being the one that you can have those Ghibli-style deep conflicts with, which was good to hear. However, I don't think it answered the question, why does it stop being fantasy? While I was writing this and thinking about the response, what came to me is that perhaps Jeremiah and Adam and Ari have a limited view of what constitutes fantasy, perhaps generally, but specifically with regards to D&D. But that also isn't correct, in my opinion, because Jeremiah acknowledges that Ghibli is fantasy too. I feel like in that particular episode, they would have just been better off saying, we wanted something you could just beat the shit out of without any complex moral questions, rather than trying to position it as, if we don't do this, this isn't fantasy. That being said, Jeremiah has said that this is just kind of like stream of conscious talking about this stuff, so that's probably part of the problem. Now, on to why did they take it down? As you mentioned in the previous part of this interview, you watched the full video that I made on this, and that means you would also have seen the section where I was like, hey, I went back to go find this video because I didn't feel like looking for it in my own stuff, and it was gone.
Yeah.
And so I'm actually really curious about why that got taken down. Like, I know, for those of you that aren't aware, it was the Make Monsters Monstrous clip that I did. And I know that, like, I know people have been talking about Obojima for a while as far as, like, what we're discussing here, but I also know that there was a resurgence on that with that particular clip, with a lot of issues with it, ones that I'm very open about as well. And so I guess I'm like, why did you take it all down?
Yeah, I can, you're very polite. People really did not like it. It did not jam well for a lot of people. Yeah, I mean, a big focus for a lot of people with that clip was, to a majority of the people that were viewing the clip, who maybe weren't as familiar with Obojima, or only had like a kind of cursory top-down view of Obojima. The big issue for a lot of those people was that it felt disingenuine or antithetical to Studio Ghibli, and like that was a big like anger point that came from those clips, where people were like, this doesn't feel like the other thing that I really like, which is totally fine, because it doesn't feel like Studio Ghibli, and that's very totally true. In general, well, in that conversation, and I think you went and watched the whole podcast too, but in general, Obojima is and we kind of spoke on this last time, is not necessarily intended to be a copy of Studio Ghibli, but rather taking inspirations of Studio Ghibli and other things like Legend of Zelda and Adventure Time and other works of art that we really love, Avatar: The Last Airbender, and taking some of those key things that we really enjoy about them and bringing them into our game. And so, although a majority of Obojima is very Studio Ghibli-esque, especially in the way that you deal with villains and conflicts, there's an aspect, especially because we're making it for a D&D game, where we need them to be more monstrous. We need the Bokoblin style creature, because that's the type of, we want both stories to be able to be told. We want you to have the opportunity to create a Legend of Zelda style adventure in Obojima, but we also want you to be able to say that this is like a Howl's Moving Castle or a My Neighbor Totoro, where there's a lot more nuance to your villains, or maybe no villains in at all, depending on the situation. Anyway, so in that specific podcast clip, though, we are referencing that much heavier side, which is like, we just want a thing that can be attacked without having the morality or conflict that you might normally find in a Studio Ghibli film. And the general reaction was pretty bad. People didn't like it. People were upset. And so, for us, if it's, although in general we do find, I do still believe that is the direction we're heading in, and it is true to Obojima, and I do understand that people were also upset about it and weren't enjoying it and didn't like it, and so we didn't feel the need to keep it up and just double down and be like, you're all wrong and here's why you're all wrong. Okay. We figured, like, if everyone's upset about it, then there's no point in keeping it up. This, in general, with these podcasts, is it's intended to kind of be like a writer's meeting. It's intended for us to just kind of chat about the world that we're creating and come up with concepts. And a lot of those concepts are cool, and some of them make it into the book, and some of them never do. But in general, it's just about us chatting about the space, which means that, like, we don't have to be hard and true to those exact things. Like, if it's a thing that no one likes and it didn't work, or people aren't jamming with it, then we're very comfortable with removing it and just being like, okay, well, this is not a take that we want to necessarily push if people don't like it. And that's kind of the point of the writers' meeting, is to kind of get an idea of if people really enjoy an idea and we can really run with it, or if people don't like it. But yeah, it's not necessarily, I know it can seem like we're trying to hide it. We're not necessarily trying to hide it. We're also just not trying to push that content if people aren't liking it. And a big issue is, like, the algorithm is kind of self-fulfilling, where it's like, if it's like something is people are angry, the algorithm is like, yes, like, let's push that. And it's like, well, if people are angry, then we shouldn't have this video. Why are we making videos that are making people angry? That's the way we looked at it. So we took them down. And yeah, that's kind of the whole reasoning behind it, is we just don't want to make content that makes people upset. So why leave that content up? I guess the only reason I would see is to try to, like, stand your ground against this type of thing. But and yeah, and again, we're open to chatting with it. Like, if someone has a question or has brought that up or concerned, we'll answer those comments or talk about it in other videos and stuff like that. But that's the reason we did it. At least that's the reason I wanted to. So
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, no, I understand. I understand that answer. Well, I understand why they decided to take it down, and I don't think Jeremiah was lying to me about them not trying to hide it, and it simply being, we don't want to push things that make people upset. The thing I know I would have liked to have seen is an explanation for its removal. For example, a while ago, a former friend, we're not former friends due to this incident, but another one down the line, called me out for reposting something anti-Semitic on TikTok. The video was saying they could understand how a group that had been marginalized by a specific group would turn around and start harming that group in turn, in a bigoted manner. I understood that too, but there was still anti-Semitism involved in framing it that way. They called me out on it, I got hostile and doubled down for some reason, and we stopped talking for a while. One of the reasons why we reconnected is because I made a video not too long after the initial interaction saying I messed up and I would try to be better moving forward, and I kept it pinned on my original TikTok with a very clear title to not hide from what happened. Now, to be clear, I am not saying that video was to the level of what I did at all. It's not. I'm just using it to illustrate how I handled that kind of situation. I did unrepost the actual offending video because I didn't want to continue spreading it, but I explained the situation and left that explanation up. I think that would have been the right way to handle taking the video down, but the removing it isn't relevant to the cultural appropriation part. I just wanted to address it. That wasn't the only clip from the podcast I took issue with, and while I don't have the clip to share, I do have the quote which I shared with Jeremiah.
Still talking about that particular video as well. I don't know if you guys, like, from when I was listening to this quote that I'm about to read, it sounded like that's what the baseline was right now, but I don't know if that's changed or not, so we kind of base our timeline off the culture of the people, but like howlers and harpies and fish folk have probably been on the island before all those people. We haven't really acknowledged that. When I first heard that, my initial reaction was just like, oh, Jesus Christ, because from where I was sitting, it sounded like, oh, hey, these three people that are not really factored into like the cultural timeline and are treated like, hey, these are just the guys that you can just go and fight and kill, were the indigenous population to Obojima, and then we got the Padami, who are a colonizing and conquering people, if I'm correctly remembering how you guys described part of that. And then after they fell, we've got the other people who might start the cultural timeline if Nakadami didn't. It very much felt like a conversation of indigenous people were here, other people showed up, and one group was conquering, and other people like more closely immigrated over here than like conquering the area, but these indigenous groups are not like counted within the timeline, and they are the group of people that we've said, hey, you can just go fight and kill these guys kind of situation.
Yeah.
With that framing in that context, I guess I want to know your thoughts on that. And one, is that still is the whole thing of like, hey, they were here first, still like, is that canonical? Is that like, and two, with that framing of all of that, thoughts?
Yeah, totally. So yes, let me go back and hark on the fact that the podcast episodes are not necessarily canon, but rather just us trying to like think through creative problems or ideas for the world. And so the Nakadama people, we don't intend them to be colonizing. They do arrive. They're the first group of people to arrive on Obojima. And the intention is not that there's like a group of these other creatures that are existing and like have their own culture, and it's like this big developed thing, and now they're coming to take over and stomp on them. But rather the kind of conflict that the Nakadama people have, I think, is more intended to be within internal. Like there's like we describe them as kind of warring, but warring within themselves. Like there's like buys for power, and a lot of the Nakadama history we kind of leave open-ended, because the intention is that it's not supposed to be very solid. Like we describe these things as kind of being fluid. A lot of it is more myth. Obojima is full of magic, and so the Nakadama, sometimes you hear things in the Nakadama history and you're like, is this a magical thing that happened, or is this just like a tall tale that is kind of stuck in history? Like that's the intention behind the Nakadama people. I think with that video, and this is not at all the case for Obojima, with that video and that specific comment, it's more about Adam and Ari and I just like thinking of that thing, like, oh, I guess we've never thought about this before. We've never thought about this aspect of the world before. So it's probably something we need to, like, we haven't mentioned in the book, but probably something we need to come up with. But we would never try to intentionally write or canonize colonization within the world of Obojima, because that's not the intention of Obojima. Obojima in a lot of ways is actually supposed to be like an idyllic view on kind of what the world could be in this space. There's things that are harkening back to maybe a lost world with the first age technology and things like that. But Obojima in itself is intended to be more idyllic, especially in its current timeline. In the past, the Nakadama people kind of are warring, and then there's a big conflict that occurs. And after that conflict, they decide to abandon the empire. They kind of disperse it, and they become more peaceful, and they don't want to hold power anymore. And that is the last time in which power is held. From that point moving on Obojima, there are no kings, there are no mayors, there are no like everyone on Obojima is guided by groups of people that rise up to kind of help each other, and it's all very communal driven. We even claim in the beginning portions of the book that like there are no kings. There's like kind of like the boisterous villain who calls himself the Lionfish King, but he's more of like a goofy, over the top character, not necessarily like he'll go and steal goods from you, but like if one of his fish folk would bring back like a kid, he'd be like, okay, well, we don't kidnap kids. That's crazy.
Yeah.
You send that back. So like like the idea though is that like that was a bad portion in the world where these people are warring, but since then we've gotten rid of that, and that's a thing that we've moved away from, and now it's more idyllic and people are communal. And even within the factions, we describe the factions as like they have influence within the world, but only because the people rely on them in like and they give back to the community. If a faction were to come up and it wasn't giving back to the island, then people would have no power or sway over the island. That's kind of how it's driven.
Gotcha.
So I kind of say all of that to say that like that is a thing certainly that came up in that podcast episode where we're talking about it, but the intention is not that like there was a group of intelligent groups of people that had their own culture and the Nakadama came and wiped all that out and made it their own. That's not what we want, and that's not the type of story that we're trying to tell. Again, I think it was just us realizing that like, oh yeah, if we're not careful, that's the kind of world that we could write. And so that's not the direction we want to head in, but it is something that came up in that moment, which is like, well, I guess we need to figure out what this is, because if we don't, then it could be written into that type of story.
Yeah. Okay. That makes okay. Thank you for that explanation, because like I said, my initial thing was like, oh Jesus Christ. Oh,
and
boy.
when you say it out loud, you're like, oh my God. And I also am like, oh my God, I don't want that type of story.
Yeah. I was like, oh boy.
Okay, so this was just a case of thinking out loud, working through things that hadn't been solidified. I do think this is an example of being careful of what you talk about in public, because even Jeremiah agrees upon hearing it out loud, it does sound like that, but there was never a plan for it to be like that. That being said, I do think this might be another example of a lack of knowledge when it comes to building out worlds and the stuff like oppressive behavior that mirrors our own. Now, none of us are born knowing how to navigate these kinds of conversations, so I don't inherently hold that against them. There are things to be educated on, and I think maybe those steps could have been more like solidified for this particular project, given the weight of it and everything, and in the TTRPG space. I'm very lucky for the education I had in college and how much my parents hammered into me the realities of oppression of marginalized people before I started creating, to the point where, at least in this particular regard, I haven't had that kind of issue before, but that doesn't mean it won't happen. But moving away from that, in the first video I did, The Problem with Obojima, I know I keep going back to that, surprise, surprise, I said that how they were treating the Howlers was the antithesis of Studio Ghibli. In this particular interview, I took it a step further.
I don't know if you got a chance to watch the entirety of the video that you commented on. It's kind of long.
I did.
So,
I did.
Okay,
I watched
awesome.
it all.
Thank you. Okay, so I then that I mentioned the like just keep monsters mantras as like the antithesis of Studio Ghibli movies, because I can't recall a single one that just has monsters being monsters. And while I understand you blended some of these elements together, how does it not feel like a bastardization of Studio Ghibli to like mash it together? Why not just stick with Zelda stuff? Like that also takes like elements from various cultures, but it doesn't have that Zelda is not in the same space as Studio Ghibli movies are, as far as how culturally, how important it is to, Japanese people, Japanese Americans, anybody in the diaspora and in the country at large. And so I guess my question is, why did y'all feel like that was the right way to handle like the marketing of it and like the combination of it, rather just sticking with like, hey, this is Zelda inspired, which wouldn't have this particular issue going on?
Right. That is an aspect that is been a challenge for us, is the inspiration leads to comparison, obviously. And so when we do something that isn't exactly in line with Studio Ghibli films, that tends to be a problem for the community, because that's what we're comparing. Like we're saying like, hey, if you like this thing, if you like Studio Ghibli, you might like our thing because we were inspired by Studio Ghibli. but the goal is not necessarily for us to copy Studio Ghibli. We're not trying to make a one-to-one. We're not trying to build a thing that is exactly like this other aspect, this other media that you like. We're trying to say, we are people who enjoy this thing. We've consumed this media. We grew up on this media and this art, and it has inspired us to make something of our own. And those inspirations have through lines that are really strong, and you can see them, and when you're in it, you feel the bones of those inspirations. But it's not to say that it's only that. We're not trying to replicate a perfect Studio Ghibli-esque story in our game. We are developing something new. What we want is for people to go and play this and go, I see how they were inspired here, but I see how it's different. And I see how, and that's okay for us. We're trying to tell a different story. We're trying to develop something that's new. That's why, we could have fought for a license and gone and made a Studio Ghibli RPG, but that's not what we're attempting. What we're trying to say is, here are all the things that we like. We feel that they can mesh together. They can produce something interesting collectively, taking bits from these pieces and then inspiring something new. That's what Obojima is attempting to be, is a mix of the inspirations, a mix of our own personal lives and enjoyment, things that we struggled with, all of it built into a unique thing. But it's always going to feel like, the moment it doesn't mix, it's going to feel like an attack or a bastardization, as you said. And I get that, but that's, I guess it's hard because we want it to feel different. We want it to feel reminiscent and see some of those through lines, but we want it to feel unique at the same time. We actually got this quite a bit. I think there's a general feeling on Studio Ghibli where a lot of people only really participate or have memory of a specific aspect of Studio Ghibli, which is that cozy My Neighbor Totoro style, issue, or not issue, that's a word. My Neighbor Totoro style story, the Cat Returns, Ponyo, like all of those things are really lighthearted. They're fun. Arrietty, they're all super lighthearted. They're great. They have a lot of emotional depth in times. My Neighbor Totoro's has those really heart-wrenching moments in the middle, and you're like, oh my goodness, we were just kids in the woods, and now my mom's dying. Right? Like that still has the depth and the nuance, and that's amazing. And we want to be able to tell that story in Obojima. We want to build a space for you to tell that story. But at the same time, we have the Princess Mononoke stories and Howls where there's deep conflicts, and that should be able to be represented too. And so just in the Ghibli aspects, even though they're true to Princess Mononoke and Howl style storytelling, even that feels like a conflict of interest for a lot of people who participate in Studio Ghibli, but in certain aspects of it. But yeah, and then there's also the big thing too, which is we create in a D&D category. We create for D&D, and a lot of people have conflict and issues with that as well, because D&D for a lot of people feels disconnected from Studio Ghibli. Although it works in line with Legend of Zelda, it definitely feels disconnected for Studio Ghibli for a lot of people. And this is now kind of coming down to they're right. Like D&D doesn't necessarily naturally fit with Studio Ghibli, and it probably would have been better as its own, game system from another company. But the reality is just like Studio Ghibli and Legend of Zelda, I've been playing D&D since I was 10, and I love D&D, and my company is based on D&D, and the things that I make are all about D&D. And so this is just a love child of all of the things that I loved and care about and inspire me as an artist, turned into something new, and D&D felt like the natural fit to me. I do think D&D is maybe a little more malleable than a lot of people give it credit for. And I think Obojima does a good job of showing that, how it can stretch as a canvas and be different.
Just to summarize my takeaway from that answer, and obviously folks, if you disagree with my takeaway, be respectful and talk about it in the comments. It doesn't feel like a bastardization because it's meant to be inspired and not a direct one-to-one, and it seems like there are very specific aspects that people interact with as far as Studio Ghibli goes in its fandom. But less conflict-heavy things like My Neighbor Totoro to real moral-heavy pieces like Princess Mononoke. The thing about that for me is something simply meant to be inspiration doesn't suddenly mean you aren't bastardizing the source of the inspiration. Like I said, and feel free to correct me, I don't recall any Studio Ghibli movies that has the monsters as just monsters. Now, I'm not the most informed about Zelda, but I'm pretty sure there are monsters that you can just kill to kill in a way they want to position the Howlers. On the note of D&D being a good canvas for Studio Ghibli, which was off topic for this particular question, but did make an opening to share this article with y'all by Thoughtpunks. I found this article thanks to Kai putting together the website, Kashi.
Let's talk about Ghibli-inspired TTRPGs capturing the true essence of Studio Ghibli and TTRPGs. Also check out the free micro RPG I was inspired to share from my slush pile by this post. Charming street scene with Totoro statue in Dalat, Vietnam capturing local ambience. Studio Ghibli is a household name synonymous with enchanting, dreamlike worlds, often celebrated for their whimsical charm and the tender portrayal of everyday life. It's no surprise that many tabletop role-playing games, TTRPGs, have taken inspiration from these masterworks, crafting cozy, pastoral experiences centered around companionship, exploration, and self-discovery. These games are often positioned as respites from the grim, high-stakes nature of other RPG genres, drawing players into warm and relaxing worlds. Yet, this trend overlooks something essential. Studio Ghibli's stories, while often deeply comforting, are never purely sweet or cozy. Beneath the surface lies a tapestry of darker, more challenging themes that infuse these films with unparalleled emotional weight. Alienation, starvation, deprivation, capitalist exploitation, environmental collapse, and oppressive hierarchies are as much a part of Ghibli's DNA as scenes of serene nature or moments of quiet joy. To fully honor the spirit of Studio Ghibli, TTRPGs must embrace these complexities, weaving them into their mechanics, narratives, and world building. The missing depth in many Ghibli-inspired TTRPGs when examining Ghibli-inspired TTRPGs most lean heavily into the studio's gentler aspects, the love of nature, the celebration of community, and the beauty in small, mundane acts. While these elements are undoubtedly central to Ghibli's ethos, they are not the full story. Films like Spirited Away, Princess Mononoke, Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind, and Grave of the Fireflies delve into weighty, often unsettling realities. To stop at the idyllic moments is to reduce Ghibli's vision to mere aesthetic. These cozy-only games often overemphasize pastoral tranquility. Many focus on exploration and relationships in peaceful settings, but fail to introduce the conflicts that would make those moments of respite truly meaningful. Ignore oppression and conflict. Ghibli protagonists often confront systems of control, whether Lady Eboshi's industrial exploitation, the militarism of Nausicaa, or the greed of the bathhouse spirits in Spirited Away. Few games dare to include similarly weighty challenges. Neglect themes of scarcity, hunger, displacement, and environmental collapse are recurring motifs in Ghibli's works, underscoring the fragility of survival and the need for human ingenuity and solidarity. What should Ghibli-inspired TTRPGs include? A homeless man sits in distress against a concrete wall, symbolizing poverty and isolation. In my opinion, emphasis. To craft a game that truly captures the essence of Studio Ghibli, designers must balance beauty with hardship, sweetness with sorrow. Below are core themes and ideas that should be considered. 1. Systems of oppression and exploitation. From the militaristic societies of Nausicaa to the capitalist underpinnings of the bathhouse in Spirited Away, Ghibli films are often deeply critical of oppressive systems. These systems don't just serve as a backdrop, they shape the very lives of the characters. Ghibli's protagonists don't simply fight against evil, they question the foundations of the world they live in. A Ghibli-inspired TTRPG should allow characters to challenge these systems, whether through direct resistance or by subtly manipulating the structures around them. Mechanics like faction dynamics and risk assessment, as seen in systems like Blades in the Dark, can offer players the ability to weigh the cost of rebellion versus accommodation. This creates a tense atmosphere where every decision counts, and the balance between personal survival and moral integrity becomes ever more fragile. 2. Themes of deprivation, scarcity, and survival are core to many Ghibli stories. Films like Grave of the Fireflies highlight the devastating effects of war on innocence, while My Neighbor Totoro showcases the economic struggles of rural life. These narratives don't shy away from showing how deprivation shapes characters' lives and decisions. In an RPG of this type, players should feel the weight of limited resources like food, medicine, or even emotional energy. Mechanics like resource tracking or forced choices between basic needs can add a layer of tension, reminding players that survival isn't just about what's in their inventory, but about the choices they make under pressure. This brings Ghibli's themes of scarcity to life, allowing the mechanics to reflect the emotional struggle of living with limited options. 3. Environmental collapse. Environmentalism is a cornerstone of Ghibli's storytelling, particularly in films like Princess Mononoke and Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind. These works show the devastating impact of human greed and industrialization on nature. In a tabletop role-playing game inspired by Ghibli, the world itself should feel alive, changing in response to the player's actions. Whether players are healing the land or inadvertently destroying it, the environmental consequences of their decisions should be felt across the game. Systems like A Quiet Year or Apocalypse World provide great frameworks for tracking environmental health and how it directly influences the narrative. This creates a living, breathing world where players must constantly reckon with the long-term effects of their choices, adding a layer of gravity to every action they take. 4. Complex antagonists. Ghibli films are famous for their complex antagonists. Whether it's Lady Eboshi in Princess Mononoke or Yubaba in Spirited Away, the characters who stand against our heroes are rarely evil for the sake of it. They have motivations, goals, and internal conflicts that make them more than just villains. In this type of TTRPG, characters should encounter adversaries who aren't easily categorized as good or evil. Instead, the game could encourage players to engage with these characters on a deeper level, possibly even negotiating or empathizing with them. Systems like Fate Core, which allow for dynamic NPC motivations and outcomes, are well suited to explore these complex relationships. This creates room for difficult choices, where the line between enemy and ally is constantly shifting, making each encounter more meaningful. 5. Moments of quiet humanity. Even in the darkest moments, Ghibli films always offer spaces for quiet reflection, joy, and connection. Whether it's sharing a simple meal or bonding over a shared moment of peace, these scenes offer respite from the chaos around them. In a tabletop RPG drawing inspiration from Studio Ghibli, it's crucial to create space for these moments. Players should be rewarded for engaging in non-goal-oriented roleplay, moments of rest, personal growth, and camaraderie. A quiet reflection mechanic or opportunity to regroup, where characters can pause to share thoughts or reflect on their journey, could provide much-needed emotional depth, akin to the town or downtime phase in Ryutama. These moments should feel earned, giving players a breather from the harshness of the game while reinforcing the human connections at the heart of the story. It is important to remember that just as hot only has a meaning in relation to cold, these quiet respites gain their context and meaning from the harsher moments and themes in the world. Conclusion: to truly honor Studio Ghibli's legacy, TTRPGs must move beyond simple pastoral escapism. They must embrace the tension between the harsh and the beautiful, the oppressive and the redemptive.
While this series started off with me just having problems with the product and who was behind it, for this particular interview, I decided to branch out into the community of Obojima. Part of the problem when it comes to the continuation of cultural appropriation in this form is the community that allows it to happen. I joined the Obojima Discord under a different name than my own. At the time, I had no idea what kind of person Jeremiah was, and I still have no idea about Adam and Ari, so I wanted to get a real look at things without the possibility of being recognized. Suffice it to say, I was disappointed in what I found, but to be fair, it could have been worse. I'm choosing not to obscure the names because just from the text that I'm about to read, you could literally just go and find it. But I'm expecting the people that are checking out this video that are a part of my audience not to go and dogpile anybody, or really possibly even bring up the conversation because this happened like last year in August.
Person 1. Love the setting. Running the setting, then I get messages how it's immoral. Why can't I like good things? LOL. Person 2. What on earth is immoral about this setting? Person 3. Here's one post. This stuff tires me out. They are sharing a screenshot of one of Kai's posts on the topic from last year. Here's the full text. The commodification, oversimplification, and objectification of Japanness is exemplified by Obojima, published by 1985 Games. It is not Japanese. It is not Ghibli-esque. It is not authentic in any way. They use Japanese culture, history, and media as a costume to create an appropriated fantasy.
The person who said, here's one post, this stuff tires me out, appears to be white from the profile picture. Yeah, you're tired of it? Well, guess what? I promise people of color are more exhausted by the act of it. I promise, promise, promise.
Person 4. People like this fail to understand that products like this or Avatar: The Last Airbender are Western homages and signs of respect to another culture. Just like many anime is set in somewhat stereotypical but respectful European settings. Attack on Titan is a great example.
You have got to be fucking kidding me. Comparing this to a fucking European setting, the ignorance is astounding, but unsurprising. This is very much a clear indication that person, and probably none of these people, should be having any sort of discussion around this. Cultural appropriation is almost exclusively an issue for cultures of colors. I say almost exclusively because there are cultures made up of predominantly white people that are marginalized and would still be affected. But to try and make a comparison to Germany with Attack on Titan is fucking wild.
Person 5. As a POC, the intent and result are important, and both were done well in Obojima IMO.
There's zero evidence that person is a person of color, let alone someone who's actually affected by this particular iteration of the conversation. As a black person, I'm not going to sit here and say, as a POC, the intent and result are important, and both were done well in Obojima, in my opinion. I bring up there being no evidence because there's a history of white people posing as people of color to try and act like something is fine. And there's also the fact that just because you're Japanese doesn't mean that this actually isn't an issue, but as somebody who's not Japanese, I wouldn't be calling out a Japanese person. That's an intra-community discussion that it's just not my place to be having in this particular conversation.
Person 6. Let them have their opinions and move on, I guess. They deserve to feel how they want. It's possible to get upset about pretty much anything if you try hard enough. We could dive deep into philosophical, moral, and ethical discussions about what is right, but at the end of the day, for me, it comes down to intentions. The purpose of engaging in this module isn't to harm anyone, it's for collaborative dreaming, connection, and fun. I love that everyone has the freedom to carry their own worldviews and perspectives. I personally choose to focus on the joy, love, and happiness caused by actions. Some people want to focus on all the ways the world has hurt them. Respect their free will and let them be hurt if it's what they desire. Person 7. God, it seems like, these days, every time someone tries to make a piece of media that takes inspiration/pays homage to a certain culture, it's somehow appropriation. Person 6. Sometimes I wonder if the problem is the demonization of the term appropriation. Maybe it could be defined as appropriation, but maybe that's not such a horrible thing all the time. Person 7. I think it's this 100%. I think people have just used it so much that it's lost all meaning, TBH. Person 5. I mean, this isn't for here, but there are art mediums that have appropriated things in a very culturally insensitive way. Obojima just ain't it. Person 4. This guy made a great video essay on this topic, IMO. This person linked to a video titled Avatar on Titan, When East Meets West. Here's the description. Attack on Titan and Avatar: The Last Airbender are both stories about war, but one is an Asian story about the West, and one is a Western story about the East. Behold the most difficult video I've ever done.
I can't actually give my thoughts on the video's content listed here because watching it is out of the scope of this video, but I will be discussing it eventually as part of this whole thing.
Person 7. I agree that there are definitely other instances where it has been blatant appropriation. but I have become desensitized to the word or those instances because whenever a Western creator makes something even remotely Eastern-inspired, people complain that it's appropriation. It is overused so much that it's hard to identify when it is and isn't, but I digress. I have been enjoying the book so far, and wanted to ask any of my fellow DMs if they had a monster they'd like me to reskin for Obojima. Person 8. Appropriation isn't a negative action. It's a completely neutral action by default. The problem is that people only learn the word appropriation in the context of discussing commercial appropriation of American Indian religious iconography, in direct opposition of the wishes of the people from those cultures. So they learned a new word and used context clues to learn that it's bad, like how people forget that the word consequence is a neutral word because as a kid they only heard it when they were in trouble. The commercial appropriation of American Indian religious iconography is bad. But it's not bad because the word appropriation is involved. It's bad because of the mountain of context.
No shit, appropriation isn't such a horrible thing all the time. But since we're here, let's talk about the different types of appropriation, shall we? From Cambridge Dictionary, appropriation, the act of taking something for your own use, usually without permission. Appropriation, the act of taking something such as an idea, custom, or style from a group or culture that you are not a member of and using it yourself. Example, the emergence of a global culture of hip-hop raises issues of racial and cultural appropriation. Appropriation, an amount of money kept separate to use for a particular purpose, especially by a government. Example, the committee approved an appropriation of $10,000. From Cornell Law, appropriation. Appropriation occurs when a defendant uses a plaintiff's name, likeness, or image without their permission for commercial purposes. Appropriation is one of several torts falling under the category of invasion of privacy. Of these 3 definitions of the word, only one of them isn't inherently bad, and sometimes the appropriation of governmental funds is in fact bad because they take it from some place that it's actually needed and give it to somewhere they don't need to fucking put it. But the other 2, which include cultural appropriation and the appropriation of someone's likeness, is in fact bad. Okay, let's get back to the interview. Now, unlike with y'all, I did not read every single one of these messages to Jeremiah. I read him one quote and then we discussed it.
I know that Obojima has an official Discord, and I have some questions about that. I know you have a community manager in there as well. Are you, Adam, or Levi in there? Do you guys interact in there? Do you leave all the moderation to the community manager? That kind of thing.
We leave a majority of the moderation to the community itself. We have a community manager who steps in and kind of answers questions because people ask products about ask questions about products or maybe their orders and things like that. So we have to be able to be in there to help with that. And we also will drive questions and things like that through the Discord. So if we're doing a community-driven project, or if we want people to, give us their thoughts on a specific thing or a thing we might have made a video about, we'll leave it there. But for the most part, it's the community that's driving it. I do jump in on occasion to leave a comment on something that's really cool that maybe someone brought up to me, or right now we're doing playtest for one of our books, and so I'll be, I might leave clarifications or ask questions on people that have, ideas or thoughts on the playtest. I used to be way more involved back in the day, and now it's just gotten too crazy for me, and I can't jump in there as much as I would love to. But
Gotcha. So it's very much we're in there occasionally, we trust our community, they kind of manage each other, and if something comes up, somebody can be pinged and be like, hey, this is getting a little out of hand kind of situation.
Exactly. And that happens on occasion, where someone says, we're pretty non aggressive when it comes to the community. So it's if you're being a jerk, if you're cursing a ton, obviously we're not going to ban you, but if you're being aggressive towards another community member, we're pretty quick to get rid of you. We're also pretty anti-AI in general, so we'll give warnings, but we do a lot of moderating around hey, if you're gonna make art, awesome, we want to see your art, but we don't want you making it with AI content. So that will occur on occasion, and we just have to deal with that. We are a little more lenient on that. It's not we're gonna go and kick someone out because of it, but we often were hey, you should please stop doing that. And if it keeps on coming, then we can take action. But yeah, that's kind of where we're at. Justin is our community manager, and he'll jump in and deal with that kind of stuff on a regular basis. And he's always kind of poking around to make sure things are okay and things aren't going crazy. But we try to, for the most part, leave the community to moderate itself.
I had this question prepared prior to having my conversation with Emma and whatnot, and also prior to us having a conversation about what happened with the rancid side of the cultural appropriation conversation. And
Yeah.
and from my understanding of that combination of things, there were people that disagreed with you bringing on a cultural consultant, and there were people that disagreed in a way that was like, hey, this is going beyond simply like, you don't agree with our opinion on this. You are taking it from a disagreement into harassing territory, and
Exactly.
those people would be the kind of behavior that would be breaking the Discord rules.
Yeah.
Kind of situation. Okay.
Yeah.
And from talking to you and from the comment that you left on my TikTok of the upload of this video, you've said you do care about like the issues of cultural appropriation and Orientalism, and that's why you brought on Emma. And I'm wondering how well you are fostering that kind of care within your community fully. I jumped in because I wanted to see, because I was going to have this conversation about cultural appropriation, because it's not just you guys, it's also the community around it and stuff.
Yeah.
And so I was like, okay, let's see what's going on in the Obojima Discord around this topic. And so I searched cultural appropriation and to see if there was conversation happening in there, and I did find some stuff that I'd like to quote and then talk to you a little bit more, but specifically with the understanding that I know you don't control what anybody else says in your Discord. I have a Discord, and I know I can't control people and whatnot and what they say. In August of last year, for those of you that aren't aware of like what happened in here, Kai made a Bluesky post talking about the issues with your product, and members of your Discord, in my opinion, proceeded to pretty much like hand wave some very real concerns he was bringing up, and like one of the quotes, them have their opinions and move on, I guess. They deserve to feel how they want. It's possible to get upset about pretty much anything if you try hard enough. We could dive into philosophical, moral, and ethical discussions about what is right, but at the end of the day, for me, it comes down to intentions. The purpose of engaging in this module isn't to harm anyone, it's for collaborative dreaming, connection, and fun. I love that everyone has the freedom to carry their own world views and perspective. I personally choose to focus on joy, love, and happiness caused by actions. Some people want to focus on all the ways the world has hurt them. Respect their free will and let them be hurt if that's what they desire. So the comment itself isn't fuck you. It's not written rudely, like it's nice.
Yeah.
But it does fall into one of those things of
it's dismissive.
Yes, and it's dismissing very legitimate concerns of people of color, that we have historical and ongoing evidence that, hey, this does harm people of color, but also specifically in this particular community, as seen by the people that took it too far. The smaller things like that harbor these bigger things. Outside of the initial Kickstarter stuff, has there been any kind of initiative to harbor like, hey guys, we know you disagree with us, however, this is not some people just want to be hurt by things. These are very real issues, a very long history in D&D and TTRPGs in general, with D&D and the real world, to kind of create the kind of community that, even if they're like, hey, we're still going to play this, should be handling it with care and not just, you know, hand waving it and saying, well, people just want to be angry.
Totally. You know, if I'm being totally honest, we haven't made like big statements on that type of stuff. We've definitely had small conversations with individuals who might raise concerns or questions or thoughts within like comments on YouTube videos or things like that. But we haven't gone and made a huge statement because it hasn't necessarily come up a ton. I think in general in our Discord or on our Kickstarter, the conversations usually the community is fairly agreed upon within these spaces, and so I don't think they often bring up those types of topics, so we don't necessarily mention them too much. But I do think that's a fairly good point, and something I honestly haven't really considered, which is like, you do kind of need to guide the community in that space, because we don't want people, you know, to be dismissive of these types of topics, even if they are, like in that comment, even if they are like in general fairly nice about it, at the same time it is a little like okay now. And so I think that's a great point. We have not necessarily done that though, although I do like that. I do think that is something that's important, and it's something that we should do. I think overall, we, for the most part, when people are coming on and they're frustrated about the topic, we don't often see a lot of the reversal of it, where people, usually when people respond to people that are upset, it's pretty simple. And sometimes we do have to delete comments or like cull stuff. That usually happens on clips of TikTok and stuff, or YouTube, or because that's where like you'll get a wider approach to things where you'll get people with different opinions who are experiencing Obojima for the first time. And like, yeah, we definitely have to be, we're someone who is a fan of Obojima will have to come in, or will come in and try to be defending us, but then defend us in a way that's not necessarily the right way of handling things, or is aggressive. And then oftentimes in those types of situations, we don't necessarily go and reach out to that individual to try to like be like, hey, you shouldn't be doing this, because oftentimes it's like a one-off comment, but instead we'll just like, all right, this isn't the type of Discord that we're going to allow from our community, and so we'll delete or hide or remove those comments. We'll oftentimes leave the person who's upset, but then delete a response that we find is aggressive. And that kind of harkens back to that Discord, which is like that Discord rule, which is like, we don't want people being aggressive in our space. Like, you can have your opinions, and if your opinions disagree with us, that's totally fine. And you can be more agreeative with us, but the moment that you start to fight or yell at people, like, it's like, okay, we don't want this type of stuff. Like, we want cordial conversation. And so, yeah, I think that's a great point, though. Overall, we've not done that before, but I do really think that's important, and I think that's honestly a topic that I haven't necessarily thought about, which I think maybe is just because I'm not necessarily in the space as much as I would hope to, but I do agree that is something that we need to be doing and should be talking about.
So the not modeling the attitude you want your community to engage in isn't an issue unique to this product or company or this serious of a topic. It's a widespread issue, but I think it's a particularly big problem when it comes to this kind of stuff because, as I said, the smaller things harbor the bigger things. Allowing these polite but bigoted microaggressive comments to exist contributes to the wider issue. As of right now, from what I'm seeing, there hasn't been anything done around making these statements to actually guide the community and provide education on the topic, which, to be clear, by that I mean providing resources for them to learn more, which your mileage may vary on that given the comments in the first place. I don't expect Jeremiah or Adam or Ari to go get degrees in the topic of cultural appropriation, etc., etc. But I don't think that's due to some malicious intent around that. I know Jeremiah said there was a lot going on, and I'm sure everything is still really busy. But I will be keeping an eye out to see if that conversation is implemented to change the culture of that space. If you saw my first video on this, I'm sure you're asking yourself, VJ, are you going to talk to him specifically about the exploitation part of the conversation? You know, the biggest part of your argument previously, truly the only part of your argument in that previous video? And the answer is, yes, I am. Of course I am. But I'm setting the stage, and there's one more thing to discuss before getting to the grand finale.
My next question here is, and this is a bit of a background question, what exactly was the process of getting Obojima onto D&D Beyond? Like, from start to finish, like, how did that happen exactly?
Yeah. So Obojima, for us, was the first like TTRPG accessory that was like a book, like written content that we had made. We'd released like free RPG day stuff or like little adventures here and there, but for the first majority of our
quick question, were those adventures system agnostic, 5e specifically?
They were 5e specifically, yeah. Okay. So for the most part, we've always made accessories for D&D. Now, some of those are system agnostic, like our terrain system back in the day, that can be used for anything. But we would make like, cards or accessories or things like that are intended for D&D 5e. And we'd been doing that for five or 6 years up until the point of Obojima. And so we had all of these like friends in the space, so people that you had met over the time at conventions, people that do 5e content and things like that. And so when we launched Obojima, it became this thing, and it was really successful and popular, and that was awesome. And so we were kind of thrust into this thing, and D&D Beyond was not necessarily on our radar in any way. And then out of nowhere, my friends who were pushing to get onto D&D Beyond, bigger creators, other third-party publishers who've been doing this for a long time, who had been in negotiations with D&D Beyond or talking with them prior, had mentioned that there was potentially an interest and that we could chat. And so I was just kind of, I was just oblivious in the space trying to make this thing, and we kind of had this popularity. And I think in general, D&D Beyond at that time was looking to try to bring creatives on into the platform, right? They were coming into this kind of like collaboration era that D&D is kind of coming into now, where they're trying to work with the third-party publishers. And Obojima just happened to be big enough that they kind of sparked some interest in that. And so through the grapevine of like third-party publishers and things like that, I kind of got word that there might be some interest, and we started chatting. And then honestly, it took a long time. I think it was like a year and a half of chatting before we actually got the opportunity to put the product onto the platform itself. But as far as that goes, it really came down to, I think, just the fact that Obojima kind of became Obojima in a time in which D&D Beyond was looking for third-party publishers to work with. And so because it kind of had that buzz around it, that's kind of why they reached out in general. And then in addition to that, it was the fact that I, thankfully had other friends who had started small with us and then kind of grew into larger publishers, and they were chatting with D&D Beyond at that same time. And so I was able to kind of make that connection just through having other friends who had, grew up into that space, and then were making those relationships. Really benefiting on the fact that other people did the hard lifting for me on that, and I was able to jump in and kind of be in the right place at the right time. And then as far as like the actual creation or the actual aspect of it, there's a lot of back and forth that went on, showing them the products. There's a lot going on in the not all content, not everything that we made was easily transferable to D&D, because the D&D Beyond's platform works very specifically, and some of our content, especially because it's third party, doesn't necessarily work exactly how standard D&D is intended. So there's some back and forth there and things like that. But overall, it was a fairly smooth process. D&D Beyond's team is busy. They're much bigger corporation and company than we are, and so it was very much so just like waiting and listening to their feedback and then getting back to them as quickly as possible. But yeah, that was the process. It was a slow rolling thing where we kind of struck where the iron was hot, and we didn't know if it was going to work out for a while, but eventually after the course of a year or so, we were able to make the connection and make it happen. But yeah, it was I think it mostly just came down to the fact that we launched Obojima on Kickstarter, and it turned into a huge project that we weren't necessarily expecting. And that in itself drew some attention to us, which we were, fairly lucky for. I think I don't know if this is necessarily true, but I think if our Kickstarter maybe were launched even like 6 months later and we didn't have that same lightning in the bottle, I don't know that we would have maybe gotten onto the platform at all.
So very much timing, popularity, and industry connections, all three played but without all three, you feel like it's like, I don't think we're gonna.
Exactly. Yeah, it was just like trying our best to use the small network we had in conjunction with the fact that Obojima became a big thing overnight, seemingly. But yeah, I mean, as far as like someone who is trying to do it now, I think the big thing that most companies that want to collaborate with you is all about like having an audience that like really cares and is connected. I think, or trying to be in some way feeling unique. I think that's one of the benefits that we had going for us as well, is that when it came to perhaps something that D&D Beyond was looking for, is that Obojima is fairly unique within the D&D space. D&D products don't necessarily look like our art style or have our same feeling or vibe very often. And so I think that in general was also pretty intriguing on the D&D zone of it all. But I'm also not totally sure. That's just my assumption.
Yeah. That makes sense. Okay, because listen, I'm a third party publisher, a third party content creator, but definitely not a
Yeah.
publisher. And every time I see a publish, like, how did this happen? I gotta know.
Honestly, to harken back to our conversation prior to the before we started recording, conventions, like, honestly have been so useful and amazing. We I'm terrible at remembering names and people, but thankfully I have friends who are much better. And so you'll just go to, a random gathering and meet the right person or connect with someone. And I think the big thing too is giving it time. Like, I think a lot of publishers and creators want to get into the space immediately, and sometimes it works right away, and sometimes you just need to incubate for a while. Like, for us, we were around for 6 or 7 years
And then
before Obojima was popular, and prior to that we were having $20,000 Kickstarters, and like, that's just how the projects went. Sometimes they're bigger and sometimes they were smaller, and it just took a little while.
Timing, popularity, industry connections. If those three things didn't exist in Jeremiah's opinion and my own, they wouldn't have gotten onto D&D Beyond. Their previous 5e's adventures that aren't there are also further evidence of that. I didn't actually know who 1985 Games were until Obojima was announced in 2023, and I know that's true for a lot of people. The creation of the setting gained them notoriety, but that's not all they've gained. 1985 Games now also has a direct partnership with Wizards of the Coast, as demonstrated by Obojima being sold on D&D Beyond next to other companies such as Ghostfire Gaming, Cobalt Press, Chaosium, MCDM Productions, Hit Point Press, and Mage Hand Press. With the downfall of the DMs Guild, thanks to AI Slop being able to sell products on D&D Beyond, which is reserved for companies usually, is extremely lucrative and hard to accomplish. Obojima has opened doors for Adam, Ari, and Jeremiah that weren't open to them before, which echoes a long history of people of color, but specifically Asian people in this moment, not being at the forefront of opportunities and products that use their culture. Now, this is a quote from the Problem With Obojima video I did previously. Obojima being the thing that has allowed them to now have a professional relationship with D&D Beyond and Wizards of the Coast is just another example under the exploitation part of EED culture appropriation. And while this is speculation, I do believe it to be true. Other products will be easier to push to the masses, which in turn shows popularity for the next project and then allows it to be on D&D Beyond, and it repeats like a cycle. Finally, folks, we get to the part I'm sure a lot of you have been waiting for, the exploitation and impact over intent section of the conversation. I'll let Jeremiah take it away.
Okay. So my next question here is, and hey folks, like, for those listening, I'll put the comment specifically of like what you left in my comment section for how we got here. But there was like a very much a theme of like, hey, we care about the cultural appropriation. We got a cultural consultant and whatnot. And I think the thing that I have to ask about that, right, is because because of how, like, what your culture consultant said to me, I do think that you do have some care for this. But one of the thing that I focused on in that video is like, there were 3 parts to cultural appropriation. There was erasure, exploitation, and denigration. And I was focusing on the exploitation part, right?
Yeah.
And so where that comes in this question is, hold on, sorry, I have notes because I wasn't gonna remember this off the top.
No worries.
So just for everybody who didn't watch the video, just to give you like the quick notes on this, the second E in EDD cultural appropriation is exploitation, and it states exploiting those cultural forms for material, symbolic, or commercial gain, benefiting appropriators financially or socially without returning value to the marginalized groups. And I guess my question about that is, what do you actually have to say about that? Because from where I'm standing, even if this is the like most, because I haven't read the book yet, I'm planning on doing like a chapter by chapter thing. I was just wider comments right now because people have asked about it. Even if we say, hey, this book is perfect, they've handled this whole thing correctly, there's still that element of, as far as I'm aware, the 3 of you, Adam, and Levi aren't Japanese folks, and there is not a Japanese person also at the forefront of this the way that you guys are, and you are not only monetarily benefiting from, Japanese culture, because as you said, it's a mashup of Ghibli Studio and Zelda, but obviously the Ghibli Studio stuff is very much in there. Not only are you benefiting monetarily, you are making professional connections, and you're on D&D Beyond, which, as somebody who is a professional TTRPG designer, getting stuff on there, getting on there yourself, I don't know the full process, but I know it's a very hard thing. So like, what is the question is like, what is your response to that actual part that, from where myself and a lot of people are standing, just exists because of this product and who you guys are, like, identity-wise?
Right. Yeah, it's definitely, I mean, I think for me to touch on this, there's a lot that this topic is very broad and there's a lot going on into it. So I'm probably not going to represent this perfectly, I don't think. But for us, the, you know, I guess the intention was not necessarily to make a Japanese oriented product line. It's not like we set in here to be like, you know, this is like the, you know, a riding on the coattails of Japanese culture, and we're just going to pluck all of these things out of it that we love the best. Really what it comes down to, and I think this is kind of a hard thing, is like the media that I happened to grow up on and love is from Japan. And so like it's this worldwide media that's growing that has all of this cultural depth. And so we wanted to build off of those things, you know, so art style similarity, but not necessarily try to lean into Japanese archetypes and things. Like we weren't trying to build off of that. When we originally came up with Obojima, the idea was that like it's that leisure fantasy feeling that Studio Ghibli has, and the art style is something that I've loved forever. And so like we wanted to do something in this space, and I didn't really know what it was gonna be. Like when we launched the Kickstarter, I kind of only had a handful of art pieces. I had the artist and I had an idea, and then it turned into something 1,000 times bigger than I ever could have imagined. You know, like up until that point, our Kickstarters were a lot smaller. We had a $500,000 Kickstarter when we first launched, you know, our company a long time ago, and ever since then, our projects have been like 30,000, 100,000, like small enough to make a cool product, but like we were barely getting by. And so this turned into something way bigger before I really knew what was going on. And all of a sudden it was this ginormous project. And so all of a sudden I'm thrust into this opportunity where I was like, oh my goodness, this really resonated with people. People really wanted something like this. And now I'm at the forefront as the creative in a space that, you know, is bigger than I expected. And also like I you know, I need to be respectful and make sure that because I'm inspired by these things, it's going to get these comparisons. And I've never done this before, and I didn't really know too much about it. So I kind of I was making something that I really loved, that I thought was really interesting, not necessarily fixating on the cultural aspect at the beginning, but realizing as the opportunity was thrust on me that I was going to be building in a space that was inspired by these, you know, just specifically these Japanese deep cultural wellsprings. And then when we brought in our consultant, I kind of had a different mindset, if I'm being totally honest, where I thought like, okay, we're building on this. We might have things that touch on Japanese culture because, you know, that we're drawing inspiration from these media formats, these art pieces. And that was, you know, after talking, we kind of realized that that's actually worse, to just touch on these surface level topics but not really give depth to them. And so instead we started to lean more heavily in some of our Japanese inspirations, and try to bring in cultural depth through Emma and our consultant Emma. And that's when it kind of shifted from being like we're gonna talk, you know, like, hey, we're gonna write this and can you help us and make sure it's not, you know, we're not being terrible people. And it turned into like, hey, can you help us build this to try to make this a piece of media in the same categories of Ghibli and Legend of Zelda that is additive, not I guess a copy and like a bad one. And as far as to answer your question, as far as like, yes, we are, I guess we're monetizing it, right? We're a business. As far as creatives, like I'm not necessarily doing this to get rich. I'm doing it because I want to create and I want to make product and I product. I want to make art. I want to make cool things. This is what I feel like I'm really drawn to as a person, as a creative. I want to make cool stuff in the D&D space. And this felt like a thing that isn't being done and a thing that I could do well. And so that's why I pushed forward in it. And I, you know, worked with Emma, our consultant, to make sure that it was, and I don't, this is presumptuous to assume that it's going to be this big grand thing that everyone will talk about, but like 20 years later, when you look back on it, it's additive. It is building media in this space, in the Studio Ghibli space, in the Legend of Zelda space. And it becomes, not for everyone, but maybe like for some people, like a household name, like a thing that adds to this very unique style of art, like this art that is more introspective, that has this specific style, this feeling. We've kind of used the term leisure fantasy because it's kind of like a weird thing to describe, but like this idea that like it's this fantasy, like you said in Studio Ghibli, that has like joy to it, like that I think kind of is missing from a lot of fantasy. It's this sense of wonder that you only get in these types of things. And so we were trying to build into that. And I don't know necessarily. I think it's, as far as like Orientalism and trying to like, we're trying to do everything we can to not be subtractive, to be additional, like additive to the community. We're trying to build something for everyone. We're trying to show that we're respectful of the culture, and it happens to be that as the creative, as the leader, I'm also white. And so I'm trying my best to make sure that this thing that I'm making is something that people can read and can see the through lines, can be happy, can be proud of, and also feel like it's not some caricature, because that's not the intention. And so yeah, that's the best I can do. I don't know. I'm trying my hardest to make something for everyone, and I also happen to be a business as well, so I'm also making a product and selling it to people. I don't know.
So harkening back to some of the stuff you said in both parts. So the first thing I want to say is that I know, at least for myself, and I feel pretty confident most people that in the same boat as me around like the cultural appropriation and the Orientalism, none of us thought you came into this with like a, ooh, I'm, you know what? We're about to do something really shitty. We know we are, and we're going to do it anyway, and we're going to profit off of this. Very rarely does it come from a place of deliberate malice. At least it doesn't start there. At some points it could get there at like some point in the conversation, but that's not where it starts, right? And so coming to this, I never had any thoughts of your intentions being bad, but does the lack of intention actually negate harm in it, right? Specifically in the first time we talked, I asked about exploitation part of EED cultural appropriation and how it's, three white guys, you guys have gotten all these opportunities, you've made all this money from it, it looks like you're going to continue to get opportunities from this and other projects, and how even if nothing else was wrong with anything, that was still like a reality, like the exploitation part of EED to a T without the intentions. Like even without intentions, impact is still there, right? I think I said in like a friends only video, like, hey, if somebody accidentally punched me in the nose and they broke my nose, like the nose is still broken regardless of how it happened, and the intentions really just decide on like how my reaction to that is going to be, whether I'm going to kick your ass or I'm going to be like, oh my god, that hurt, I know you didn't do it on purpose, kind of situation. So knowing your intentions but not changing the impact, like what is the thoughts on the fact that just from the facts of the situation, you guys are still like very squarely falling into that category?
Yeah, I think, I guess the thing to kind of mention, or the thing to kind of think about, is I guess there is intention, but that's also the content, I think, is a big aspect of it too. So I personally don't think that Obojima is Orientalism. even with maybe the description that you're giving, where it's like we're profiting off of this, we're profiting off of an Asian culture and using it to like as a like weaponizing this Asian culture as a method in order to earn money necessarily. I don't believe that we're doing that personally. I think aspects of Obojima are inspired by bodies of work that are culturally significant, that have cultural significance in Japan and things like that. So like, Studio Ghibli, Legend of Zelda, these things are bodies of work by Japanese artists who have inserted cultural significance into it, things that I couldn't potentially comprehend or don't know about. And that is true. But Obojima is not intended to be a representation of Japan, and it's not intended to utilize Japan's culture specifically to make a new product. It is inspired by things that are certainly there are certainly aspects of Japan within that, but overall, that is not the goal of Obojima. The Obojima is a culmination of many things and many inspirations, many aspects around the world, including, life in Oregon where I live and things like that. And then in addition to that, I think a big aspect and things that I'm kind of leaning on are my cultural consultant guiding me, bringing on Emma to make sure that, I guess that the thing that I'm building is not, pulling away from the space and being a negative impact. And when it comes to earning money, that's certainly, when framed in that regard, it is a battle that I can never win, because it is certainly Obojima has inspirations. Those inspirations do come from Japan. It is not intended to be inspired by Japan, nor is it meant to be a surrogate for Japan. Obojima is its unique thing with its own unique spaces. We intentionally avoid very specific things from Japan because we don't want to be connected. Like we're avoiding Shintoism and things like that because we don't want to be connected to those aspects. Not necessarily that they're bad, but that's because that's not the intention of Obojima. And so, I would say that when looking at it in that regard, we are making a product. That product is inspired by certain things, but in general, it is not intended to be a representation of Asia. And when we do represent Asian things, when we do represent Japanese things, those things are done with respect, with intention, and in an additive way that we try to make a thing that is respectful when we do see the tie to that space. But overall, the goal again is not that we're trying to sell Japan on people. We're trying to sell a feeling, the feeling evoked by these pieces of media, and these pieces of media happen to be Japanese, and so that's why we're trying to be, careful and cautious and respectful. But overall, though, with intention behind it, with our intention behind it, when framed in that manner, that it's like this is a body of work that is just representing Japanese culture, and we are selling it to make money, and we're white guys. I don't think that's what we are doing. But that is 100%, I guess, up to interpretation on your end. But that is how I feel Obojima is represented, and that was the intention behind Obojima. And I guess without intention, just looking at it, I guess that's for people to decide necessarily whether they believe it fits into the framework of this is a Japanese thing that's been whitewashed and now being sold, or if it's a thing inspired by aspects of Japan, but wholly unique in its own space. So that's my feeling on it. I don't know. That's the way I look at it, and the way that I've built it. And a big aspect on Orientalism is that I'm also relying heavily on people who know more than me to kind of guide me, because I am no expert in this topic in any ways. So it's not to say that it's not like I'm a fool and just kind of like not thinking about it or doing, putting in my own efforts. But most certainly when it comes to these topics, I'm relying heavily on the people that we work with and Emma and other aspects like that to ensure that, that I believe that when the statement is made, hey, this is done its due diligence and this is not Orientalism, then I have to put my faith and believe in that aspect, because that's, that is how I make this art. That is how I make this thing that I, love so much. So yeah, that's kind of where I stand on all of that.
So in both interviews, there was this conflation of Orientalism and cultural appropriation, despite me continuously using the phrase cultural appropriation. And in the video that sparked this particular interview stating I'll defend my Orientalism argument throughout my reading of the book, more than likely. However, the conflation doesn't actually change the answer, because he's still addressing my actual comment, which is, you're still three white guys profiting off of Japanese culture. The use of the word weaponizing is very interesting here because it carries a specific negative connotation. If you say someone is weaponizing something, you're clearly saying they are doing XYZ thing with malicious intent. And again, there's never been a moment, at least for me, where I thought the creation of this product was done with malicious intent, right? I don't think there's some mustache twirling, evil guys, right? But the use of a cultural consultant is important in a project like this. And again, it's good they brought someone for that, especially someone as talented as Emma. But as I said multiple times, even if they made the most perfect book within the text, the reality of them being three white guys benefiting from Japanese culture through the creation of this book still exists. Jeremiah mentions not being a negative impact. I'm sure y'all know my thoughts on the statement. I categorically disagree. To once again reference the first video I made on the topic. In The Problem with Obojima, I showed the long history of TSR and Wizards of the Coast pulling from Asian culture without Asian voices being at the forefront, and that only changing in the modern iteration of Wizards of the Coast. Obojima is a continuation of that history. It is another link in the fence of this kind of behavior, and each link makes it harder to dismantle the system that enables this happening. It is not intended to be inspired by Japan. I think throughout this conversation, Jeremiah made a lot of contradicting statements around that. Obojima is inspired by Studio Ghibli. To quote myself, Studio Ghibli movies are part of Japanese culture. While there are other elements involved in the storytelling method and the topics within the movies, it's quintessentially Japanese art in animation form. So when Jeremiah says Obojima is inspired by Studio Ghibli, he is saying it's inspired by Japanese culture. Another quote, "We dug deeper into the cultural aspects as not to be shallow." That goes beyond simply being inspiration at that point. When we do represent Asian things, when we do represent Japanese things, those things are done with respect in an additive way where we try to make a thing that is respectful when we do see a tie to that space. That statement and it's not intended to be inspired by Japan cannot exist together. They are diametrically opposed. And again, when we do represent Japanese things, which tells me there are Japanese elements in the product, at this time, I'm still working my way through it. We'll come back to that, obviously. Unfortunately, some things aren't up for interpretation. Again, I agree they didn't come into the creation of this project with ill intent, but again, intent doesn't change the actual action or impact. And the action and impact is, once again, three white guys benefiting off of Japanese culture. Jeremiah brings up whitewashing, but I don't think that even needs to be part of the conversation here because, as I've said before, this could be the most perfect product ever written and inspired by Japanese culture with no issues within the text of the project, and yet we still are left with the reality that I keep reiterating. There are three white guys benefiting off Japanese culture. I don't really have a comment on the additive nature of this project because one, I'm still reading through it, and two, it's irrelevant to the particular question I was asking. There's no caveat in exploitive cultural appropriation saying, if it's additive and good, it's not appropriation. Now, I came away from this feeling better about the project than I did going into it. It does appear to be the case that Jeremiah wants to put care into what he's doing and will listen when things are being pointed out to him, at least to a point. I want to reiterate, I don't think Jeremiah is a bad person, and I'm willing to say neither are Adam and Ari, the other two guys on the project, just based on the conversation I've had with Jeremiah. I don't think there's any malicious intent in making this project, and I think Jeremiah was very open and honest with me as we had this conversation, and I was delighted to hear about him reaching out to Kai and really listening. That being said, the issue I outlined in the very first video still exists no matter intent, and that is something that Jeremiah just wouldn't admit is the case, which is disheartening. Admitting that truth, in my opinion, wouldn't change anything for the worse. Obojima would still be making money. Not enough people in the space care enough about this topic to stop supporting this kind of stuff, even with a proclamation of, hey, you're right, we are engaging in a type of cultural appropriation. Hell, some good things would be weeding people out of your community you don't want in there, which does appear to be the case from this conversation. And also, we need allies in this conversation to change the culture of TTRPGs for the better. Also, acknowledging a problem exists is the first step to enacting real change. Being unable to just acknowledge a simple fact from a simple definition makes it hard to enact change in any space. Enacting real lasting change would make it so it wasn't a problem for people like Jeremiah to make a project like this. To bring in another topic I discuss pretty frequently, whitewashing and race bending. I often see people stating it's not fair, it's okay to race bend, but whitewashing is bad, and to them I say, well, if you want it to be okay in both directions, in systemic oppression. If systemic racism wasn't an issue, it wouldn't matter what was being done. If systemic racism was gone, underrepresentation and overrepresentation of bad representation wouldn't be a thing. It wouldn't need to be corrected in a myriad of ways, including race bending. When all of us are equal, these kinds of equalizers don't need to exist. But that's it, folks. Thanks so much for being here. I'll see you next month. I'm not quite sure what the next video for the channel will be, but this series will continue with my chapter by chapter read of the book. More than likely, I will post that as extra videos on top of the once per month thing I do. I don't foresee myself taking like 3 or 4 months to read every single chapter and then posting it for you guys. But see you later. Peace out.